Hello and welcome to today's Real Experts webinar for must-do steps to keep you and your clients out of trouble when a mortgage is involved. Now this jam-packed webinar's presenter is Jerry Anderson, who has been in the real estate arena for 34 years and has a ton of great information and tips to help you achieve a successful and timely closing. Now this webinar today is interactive, which means we would like to hear from you. The webinar is broken into 4 steps, and we'd like to hear from you after each of those 4 steps. So please use the chat room to ask questions as you have them, and we will do our best to get them all answered within the allotted time. Now, with that said, I want to hand things over to Jerry to get things rolling, and welcome, Jerry.
Thanks, Jane, for the introduction. We want to start off, first of all, first, thank you for attending the webinar today. Hopefully you're going to get some good information that's going to help you make your transactions go more smoothly. But we do want to point out that this course is for residential real estate only. So if you're into commercial real estate, land sales, something like that, the topic's probably going to be, well, hopefully be interesting. It might help a friend that you're, facilitating a house, but it's not anything to do with trying to sell a business or land. So with that said, let's get rolling. As the introduction said, we're going to talk about today is 4 steps for you and your clients to follow in the process when they're getting a mortgage as a part of purchasing a new home. One of the things, I'll just go back to my experience, is that real estate agents tend to, let's say, follow up is number one, but I just say, tend to be afraid to ask questions. When you have your initial meeting, whether they're coming through your open house or they've called you off the phone or some type of internet inquiry, real estate agent is real quick to say, yeah, okay, let's meet at the house, great, blah, 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 blah. And then you get down, you write up a purchase agreement, and then you worry about the details later, and then you find out, I should have probably asked some questions beforehand. And that's what really we're going to be covering today. So here we go. Before you write the offer, step number 1, you need to know. Now, you as the real estate agent, I'm going to speak to you, by the way, as a listing broker or a listing agent, as well as a selling agent. A lot of the financing questions, they're going to apply to the buyer's side of the transaction, but still as a listing agent, you need to know this information. So let's get started. Number 1, you need to know, is this client, by the way, been pre-qualified or pre-approved? You need to know what the difference is. Now, pre-qualification means, and you might want to write this down or circle it, do whatever. Pre-qualification means that the client or the home buyer has spoken to a lender, they spoke to a loan officer, and the loan officer has interviewed them and asked them questions about their income, their assets, and credit, okay? But nothing's been underwritten. For a person to be pre-approved, the loan must be, or that person must be underwritten. So typically that's what I call a second set of eyes. Most real estate transactions today, residential real estate, up to around $500,000 in your market or in our market, the lender uses what's called an automated underwriting system, which is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's loan prospector, then there's desktop originator and desktop underwriter. By a lender putting that information, a borrower's income, assets, and pulling the credit, it put it into the system and algorithms and the worldwide internet web machine that I call it, disseminates all information, and they come out with what's called findings. They say, yep, you've been pre-approved. And the pre-approval is going to be probably subject to your buyer, the client, coming up with pay stubs, tax returns, divorce decrees, and so on. But know the difference. Pre-qualified only means a person has interviewed the buyer, whereas pre-approved means buyers provided information and it's went through an underwriting system. Myself as representing clients, because I do actively sell real estate still in this market, I require pre-approval. I don't care who it is. I want pre-approval. I don't want a pre-qualification. Next, what type of financing is your client approved for? When they come walking in to your open house, or they've come to you and they've talked about their interest in buying a home, you need to find out the type of financing. Now, in most cases, you're going to have conventional FHA, VA, bond if your state or your particular community has first-time home buyer programs, and then there's what's called USDA or RD, also known as rural development. Each one of those types of financing has little idiosyncrasies or requirements where the buyer must meet as well as the property must meet to be eligible for the financing. You have to know the difference. I bring up today is not, it used to be FHA was a real strong lending program, and that's kind of diminished a little bit because conventional finance has become so attractive. Their terms typically are better, and they've decreased the amount of down payment or increased the loan to value per person to buy. What I want to make sure that you know is that if a person says, I'd like to go FHA, but I want to buy a fixer-upper. Well, that's probably not going to be the best loan program, or you're going to need to know what a 203K is. The person is going to say, I want to go conventional, but I don't have any money to put down. Well, then we're probably going to have to look at an RD program because conventional is going to require some type of financing. And that's going to be dependent upon what your marketplace is. Okay? The buyer's budget. Through this automated underwriting system, which has been around, I think, since the late 90s now, a lender puts the buyer's information into the system, and it'll come back and it'll say, you've been pre-approved for a house payment, let's say up to $2,500 a month, and a home up to $400,000. And the buyer goes, wait a second, I can't afford $2,500 a month. Okay? Well, the loan officer hopefully is going to get some education into the buyer, but really you as the real estate agent, the real estate professional, you need to know. You need to ask them, what is their budget? And if they say to you, you know what, I was paying $1,500 a month in rent. I know I can afford $1,700. You know what, let's stick with that. Work the numbers backwards, knowing what their monthly house payment would be. Along with that, you want to find out is how much money does the buyer have to invest in the new home? As I said to you, conventional financing right now, you can get with 3% down. FHA is 3.5%. If the person's eligible, God bless them for their service to our country as veterans. You could buy 0 down in your marketplace. USDA and RD could be 0 down as well, but you need to know what the specific parameters are. I always say if a buyer has at least 5% down, always go conventional type financing. That's the best possible financing terms the buyer's going to have. Now, listing agents, pay attention. If you see an offer come in on a piece of real estate that you're representing the seller, and the buyer's going with FHA financing and they're putting 10% down, you need to step back, maybe ask some questions, because the only reason to go with FHA type financing with that much money down is because the buyer has less than perfect credit. They have a lower type credit score, or there might be some extenuating circumstances that would prevent them from getting conventional financing. So it's just be aware. But if a buyer's coming FHA, they're going 3.5% down, that's going to be typical. That's standard. VA 0 down. As far as the money for the down payment, and again, before you write the offer, you need to ask the buyer, do you have this money in the bank now? Is it readily available? Are you going to be needing a gift or a down payment assistance? If they are, you need to follow through the processes to make sure that you have that money in place. I would say to you now on the buyer side, representing buyer's agents, is I want to see that money in their bank before we write the contract. Okay, before you write the contract. As a listing agent, if I see an offer come in and the pre-approval letter states that subject to verification of receipt of gift funds, I'm going to want a condition in there that the gift funds are received by a specific date. And I would make that date as short as possible. There's nothing worse than scheduling on a closing 30 and 45 days, and you're on the 35th day scrambling to find out where's this buyer going to come up with a down payment. You might be coming from mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, and they have to liquidate funds. It's got to be wired. There's got to be a paper trail. You know what? That's not something you do at 5 days prior to closing or the day of closing. You're going to be doing it at the time you're writing up the offer or probably within the inspection period, okay? Now, as you're discussing with them their financing terms, you want to talk about what's the closing date. And you, as a real estate agent, you need to look at the calendar and pull it, because we're going to talk about TRID here in a little bit. And some of the other conditions that are met for just prior to closing. But knowing what closing date they want to have is going to help you work out the details. Because in today's world, the closing date is really just the final. You should have all of your paperwork in order, funds in line, as I like to say, with no later than 3 days before closing. So to me, that's actual closing date. As an example, we're coming into June now, okay? Let's say you've scheduled a closing date of June 30th. It's the end of the month. Great. I want to have everything in order by June 25th. Listing agent, buyer's agent. Okay? I'm going to be speaking to somebody, making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. When you're dealing with somebody who's committed to a lease, you need to pay attention to, do the kid get an early out? Maybe it's possible where you can negotiate something of a rent back or temporary housing for them. Furthermore, in today's fast-paced world, a lot of people living together, you young millennials, as I like to call, I have several of those myself. A lot of people live together. There isn't just one person in one apartment or dwelling anymore. You might have 2 or 3 people that are living together, and those 2 or 3 people maybe are moving forward to buy a house together. Well, you need to be aware of any life changes that are going on. If, for example, two single guys are living together, but they're going to buy a house together, they're not closing until August, but one of the fellas is going to be getting married, and his new wife is going to be moving into the house. Well, does she need to be entitled? Does she be held as part of the down payment? Does she want to be part of the qualifying? These are things that you need to know. A life-changing event typically is the reason why people are buying and selling real estate. Same goes for a divorce. Somebody says, you know what, we're ending our relationship, cohabitation agreement, we're ending it or we're beginning it. You need to have all that paperwork in order. This is before you write the offer, and be prepared to have those notes. This is one of, I guess, probably my most important tip today as a part of this webinar is when you get started, again, before you're writing the contract, is that you speak with the client about getting a letter of consent, which allows you to speak to the buyer's lender. It is so important that as an agent that you know this, okay? And on the listing side, when an offer comes in and you're in a situation where you have multiple offers, ask for consent too. Now, you don't need to know what the buyer's exact credit score is or what their income is, but what you do need to know is you can pick up the phone, call that loan officer or that processor or the loan officer's assistant and ask the question, did he bring in the pay stubs? Do you have the tax returns? When is the appraisal going to get done? What other information needs to be obtained for us to get final approval, what's called cleared for closing? Listing agent, buyer's agent, both sides, there's no reason that you can't have that information. All right, we moved along pretty quick. Jane, do we have any questions and answers so far?
Yes, well, we have one question so far from our audience of 40, so hopefully some other people will be chiming in.
Okay,
but
good.
The first question is, what are the main reasons homes are only available for conventional loans, and can you ever work around that restriction?
Okay, that's a great question. Here's the scoop, and I'll go back to, I'm old school, they call it the 3S theory. When I learned real estate mortgages, this is back in the 80s where we had pagers. It was called the 3S theory. It meant it had to be safe, sound, and sanitary. Now, all homes need to be safe, sound, and sanitary most commonly. I mean, why would you want to sell a house or buy a house that's not safe? But FHA has specific guidelines that must be met to be eligible for that type of financing. Whereas conventional financing, there are no specific guidelines other than safe, sound, and sanitary, meaning significant. Let's say, for example, lead-based paint. House built prior to 1978, FHA, if they pick it up in VA, by the way, same. We'll just use the question as FHA. If there's paint that's chipped, peeling, or cracked, the appraiser is going to require that that paint be sand sealed, corrected, okay? Whereas with conventional type financing, the paint wouldn't be an issue. Also goes along with, for example, a handrail or the height of a handrail. FHA requires certain height standards, whereas conventional doesn't. So the way to work around that situation is get the house prepared for FHA financing, especially if you're in a first-time price bracket in your market. We're nationwide, so I can't give you exact prices, but here in where I am in Minnesota, first-time homes between 150 and 250,000. If it's missing a handrail, if the lead-based paint is an issue, it's got a cracked window, fix it. Get it done before you put the house on the market, so then you know you can offer it, because offering it with the most types of financing is going to get you the best possible price. Any other questions?
Not right now, Jerry. Hopefully people will chime in, and please let's go on to step 2. Thanks. Great answer.
All right, great. Thanks, Jane. All right, now, so I talked about you're dealing with a client. You need to find out they've been pre-qualified, pre-approved. You're getting the letter of consent where that client or the buyer has allowed you to speak to the lender, here's the thing. You pick up the phone and you call that loan officer. You speak to them. And the first question I always ask is I want to know, is the lender a banker or a broker? Okay. Now, there is no advantage of one over the other. I want you to know I was both a banker and a broker for 20-some years. Okay. What's important to know is that a banker uses their funds, whereas a broker uses funds of another. So now you get into, well, who's going to underwrite the loan? A banker, typically, they are always going to underwrite their loans, whereas a broker is going to require that it go outside of their company to have the loans underwritten. That could add time to the process. So you want to ask them, how long is it going to take? How long is it taking to process a loan? How long is it taking to underwrite the loan? And then next is, who's going to fund the loan? Same question. How much time is needed in advance? Where are the funds coming from? Now, a banker uses funds of their own, so they go into the vault, they get the wheelbarrow out, and they fill it up with money, and they show up at the title company. That isn't the case. But at least they do have it lined up. It's already there, whereas a broker needs to reach out to the investor to whom they're selling the loan to. Okay? Now, when you're calling the lender and you're talking about banker, broker, finding out they're pre-qualified or pre-approved, so on, you need to inform them. By the way, listing agents, this also applies, as there are unique qualifying requirements that need to be met. So I'll just say for a second, we take the buyer. The buyer's going to be a first-time home buyer, and they're going to get down payment assistance. They're probably need home buyer counseling. Well, that's a class that needs to be taken, and there's a course, it's a test they've got to pass to get a course completion certificate. If you see in a pre-approval letter or you're in your conversations and it says home buyer counseling, you want to make sure that gets done. You line it up. You get this, again, at the first part of the process. You don't wait until after the person's had their home inspection. You don't wait until after the appraisal's been done. You get it up front. If your buyer isn't willing to do that right away, you don't have a really solid deal. There's too many ways for this contract to become voidable or the buyer would become in breach because of lack of delivery in a timely manner. Back to, again, source of funds for the closing. You want to make sure the money's all lined up. Conditions other than the appraisal and title work, such as credit repair, credit rescoring, satisfaction collections, judgments, or liens. If a loan officer or the lender tells you, well, yeah, I've got them pre-approved, but we're working on getting the score improved. Well, that could take, as long as 6 months. So you're going to want to probably take a look at that pre-approval letter or that offer very closely. Again, listing agents, that's important for you to know as well. Same with the rescoring, or they've got to satisfy collections. Some lenders will allow a buyer to close with an outstanding lien or judgment of like a medical debt type of thing. Fine, whatever. You need to see what your local policy is. But if they say, yeah, we've got to go through this process, and he's going to have to get the IRS satisfaction, and then he lived in 3 different states, and so we got some state tax liens. You know what? That could take 30 to 60 days before that gets resolved. And that's where you need to take a look at then, can I achieve the closing date? When you're speaking with a lender, you want to ask, how long is it taking to get the appraisal? Most lenders right now, because of what's called TRID, which stands for the Truth in Lending Rest by Information Disclosure Act, TRID has a process where lenders must do things in the beginning of the loan application, meaning at the time your offer gets accepted, and also prior to the closing. One of the things you need to find out is, when does a lender order the appraisal? Many lenders won't order the appraisal until the TRID requirements have been met. And if your market is as hot as ours is, they're holding off on ordering the appraisal until the inspections have been done, because a lot of times buyers and sellers are renegotiating working with their real estate agent. They're renegotiating the price of the terms while the inspection is being done, and they don't want to mess up on the appraisal. So if your inspection period is 15 days and it's taken 10 days to do the appraisal, and you want to close in 27 days, and TRID requires that you need to be 3 days before with all funds and all clear for closing, do you think you're going to make your closing date? Probably not. So you need to stretch out your closing date. Okay? Don't try and shorten the inspection period, and don't try and think that the appraiser is going to pull off some miracle and get your appraisal done in 1 day or 2 days. That is setting yourself up for a disaster. Back to talking about underwriting the loan and preparing the closing package, just ask them, how long does it take now? I do know from a national standpoint, because that's one thing I do, mortgage education, is right now underwriting is taking 24 to 48 hours. Doing a closing package is taking 24 to 48 hours. Now, remember I said to you a little bit earlier in step number 1, we want to know about the closing date. Well, if it takes 24 hours to underwrite a loan, let's just say it's 48, so it's 2 days. And then it takes 2 days to do the closing package. And your closing is on Friday. That means Monday that loan better be in underwriting, all done on Tuesday. Wednesday it better be doing the closing package, Thursday. And by the way, hopefully they've sent out true disclosures on Tuesday, the 3 days prior. If they haven't, like I said, 5 days before, if they haven't done it, you're not going to meet your closing date on the 30th. You want to try and reschedule, Friday, excuse me. You want to try and reschedule. Any questions on this one, Jane?
Yeah, we have a question from Crystal, who lives in Colorado, and she said, I live in Colorado and was recently speaking with another realtor. He told me that if a property is classified as a cabin, financing is not available except through a private bank loan. Is this true? And if so, why?
That's a great question. Now, Crystal, thank you for the question. First, I want to get it defined as a cabin because us people from northern Minnesota, you know, we all have cabins up here. People live in their fish houses. What I'm getting at is, does it have year-round utilities, or can it be occupied year-round? So does it have heat, plumbing? That's all you really need to have is heat and electricity, all right? Heat, plumbing, electricity, because the appraisers got to appraise that cabin just like they would 3 other homes of similar manner. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, now they're the people that kind of make the guidelines and purchase the loans, require that all conventional type financing, the property be year-round. So in this case, if the cabin has a space heater and it's got outdoor facilities for your business, then it's not going to be eligible for regular financing. Next.
Great. Well, that's our only question for now. If Crystal comes back with any more feedback on that, I'll let you know. Otherwise, let's go on to step 3.
All right, step number 3 is providing information that the lender needs. So now we're getting down to the wire here. We're putting together the paperwork. You know, you've got your representation agreement. You've done your disclosures. You've read everything. Now we need to, let's say, hone it up, polish it up, so that when your offer gets accepted, all these details are done. First, you need to take a look at one of the issues, the problem we have is that a lender's pre-approval letter in today's world is a lot of times it's too vague. They'll put in the buyer's names and they'll put down John and Mary Smith have been pre-approved for conventional financing on a home up to $300,000 and a loan amount up to $250,000. Okay, that's kind of vague. That'll work. I'm not saying it won't work, but I would want to tighten it up a little bit. I'd want to have a specific sales price, what's going to be on your contract. I want to have the specific, first day with my new teeth, specific loan amount. So it's not $300,000 to $250,000. The sales price is $287,900 and your loan amount's $248,500. That's what should be on your pre-approval letter. And now if you deal with a situation where maybe the property has more or higher than normal property taxes, or it has association dues like a condo or townhouse, I would want to have the PITI in there, meaning how much is this person approved for the monthly payment. Again, listing agents is what you also need to pay attention to. So when you look at this and you see the offer comes in at whatever the number, and you know, by golly, that PITI is at $1,500, but based upon the terms that's in the purchase agreement, the PITI is $1,800. Do you have a deal? You probably don't. Okay? Let's get this thing fine-tuned. Loan-to-value ratio is also important, especially when you're dealing with multiple offers. Sometimes buyers will say, I want to come in, I only want to offer 5%. I want to put 5% down, 95% loan-to-value. That's great. It's completely allowed. Does the buyer have the ability to put more? If I'm in a multiple offer situation representing the buyer, I'm going to have that lender put in a pre-approval letter that the offer is based upon a 95% loan-to-value, but the buyer has sufficient funds to go to 80% loan-to-value, as an example. Or in an FHA, the buyer has sufficient funds to go 3.5% down, but the buyer can do 5% down. That, just having that language in your pre-approval letter may be the difference of you getting the house versus the competition. When you're writing up the offer, you need to inform the lender of unique characteristics about the house. Just like the question, I guess, that Crystal asked from Colorado is there anything that could prevent the lender from offering the loan because of the property, okay? And I'll just go through these bullet points right here. First is a condo. Now, listing agents and buyer's agents. We have a problem here where I am in this market, where they put houses on the market, call them a townhouse, but when you look at the legal description in the MLS, it's a condo. You know, the large data search, Zillow and Trulia, where consumers go, they just take a look at it and a real estate agent puts in townhouse, but they don't realize it's not a townhouse, it's a condo. If it's a condo, that type of financing needs to be, if it's a condo where they're getting financing, the condominium needs to be approved. And it's to be approved by, it'd be Fannie or Freddie, it could be an FHA spot approval, or it could be by a specific bank. You need to find that information out. And that should be in, again, listing agents, it should be in the MLS detail. Buyer's agent, if you're out showing buyers townhouses, or buyers are, by the way, they go on the internet and they're shopping for the homes, they might be using your website, they might be using your broker's website, or they might be going to the yahoo.com and realtor.com. Those particular sites don't have all the information. Educate them. Explain to them. Before you say, hey, let's go take a look at this, we need to find out, is it a condo or a townhouse? Is it been approved or not? Okay. Next, we're talking about is a hobby farm. What I recommend for hobby farms, a person can purchase property with 10 acres and can have a barn on it, for example. But what they can't do is be raising livestock. So as I tell listing agents, get the livestock out of the pictures. Chickens you can have, goats, dogs, cats, that type of thing, but not a kennel, all right? Where you're running a boarding type situation. But you want to make sure with a hobby farm that it's just basically something with, a main building with outbuildings where maybe they store their lawnmower or they have a car collection or something like that. That's great. Now with rural property, just so you know, Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they want to see home sale comparables. If you want to write this down, they want to see at least 3. I can tell you they're asking for 4 right now, but they want to see at least 3 homes sold within 1 mile within the last 6 months to substantiate the value on the property. Now you get to rural properties where homes might be like in Colorado or Montana, you guys, or if you're out in Wyoming, your homes might be 10, 15 miles apart. That's fine, that's typical for the area, but you should be talking to the lender beforehand to find out, here's the comps I've got. The lender, not the appraiser. Talk to the lender, here's the comps I've got. Do you think this is going to work? Send them your CMA, your marketing information. The loan officer's going to know. They're going to be able to tell you. So real property acreage, that goes along kind of hand in hand. Fixer-uppers or flips. As I shared with you when we started out, if a buyer's purchasing a home with FHA financing and it says needs TLC, it's a fixer-upper. Or with a little bit of elbow grease, you can make this into a diamond. Well, that's probably not the best property for FHA financing, so understand the process, know what it's going to take to get the things done. Same goes with the flip, is when was the flip sold? You want to make sure and talk to the lender. Are they going to require additional documentation regarding the title, who owns the property, and so on? Okay. A lot of times people have purchased flip properties in the last year or two, and they're buying them in the name of an LLC or an LLP, so that's what's on the purchase agreement. Well, your lender, that's for the buyer's getting the financing through, by the way, listing agents, follow along. If your client, the seller, is an LLC or an LLP, the title company, the lender, is going to ask for a copy of those documents or some document showing that the seller is an authorized signer to move that property. Now, providing information that the lender needs. Does the letter state, so you're looking at the pre-approval letter, does it state on there that we still need to verify their assets, or we need to get a pay stub? We got to verify that they're going to get their increase in their wage, or their bonus is going to come June 15th, something like that. If these things need to be done, you want to make sure that they get done within the time frame that you've set for your closing date. Again, moving forward to closing date because of TRID requirements. I keep saying all these things are so important, and this one here to me is almost like the most important one. Do the names on the contract match the lender's approval? Over 91% of people go to the internet today. This is from the National Association of Realtors. They're going to the internet to shop for their homes. They're doing their own education. They're seeking out information before they come to see a real estate agent or a loan officer. Now, recent statistic, I think from 2015, was told that a home buyer spends about 7 months shopping for a home or making their decision, from the point of saying, yeah, I'm thinking about buying, to when they actually go into contract. And during that time, they see 7 different real estate agents and they speak to 3 different lenders. Okay, they're getting information. That's good. That's helpful. Helps them understand. Don't assume, though, that what they've got is what is going to be workable for you when you're writing up the offer. For an example, they started out the process as a single person buying the home, and then here they bring in a friend, or they get married. Okay, vice versa. They start with 2 incomes, and now they're down to 1 income. You want to make sure that whatever the names that are on that pre-approval letter, because that's how that loan is going to be closed, match what's on your purchase agreement. And match the letters spelling as well. I can't tell you the number of times where closings get held up, or the title closer ends up having to do an AKA because instead of the person's legal name is, for example, my legal name is Gerald L. Anderson Jr. That's my full signature, and that's my name, okay? But everybody knows me as Jerry. And a lot of times I'm signing things as Jerry in my day-to-day activities. And so if I'm talking to somebody, they're going to say, well, they didn't even know I was Gerald. Gerald's with a G, Jerry's with a J. Blame my parents. Don't blame me on this. All right? But here's the thing. Every time I go to closing on real estate that I'm buying or selling, I have to go through the process of the AKA. It's additional steps, and it could become a mess. All right? Make sure that the pre-approval letter matches the contract. Okay? If the offer requires the seller to pay all or part of the closing costs, you want to call and confirm beforehand on what is allowed and what it costs. Now, in your marketplace, and this varies all over the country, where I am here in the upper Midwest, we have some of the highest closing costs in the country. You get down to Florida, I think they're also high, but you get into the Midwest or down to Texas, that area, supposedly closing costs a little bit less. You need to know what they are. Is the seller going to pay a dollar amount, or going to pay a percentage, or both? You need to put it in the contract. For an example, seller agrees to pay up to, for example, 3% of closing costs and buyer's prepaids upon successful closing. Well, what if the closing costs are 2 3/4%? There's that extra 1/4%. Want a $300,000 house? That's $750. Where does that money go? You want to make sure that you got the language, you got your buyer teed up, or you got your seller teed up, language in the contract, that wherever that excess is, it's going to the right place and what's been agreed upon. Furthermore, you need to verify that if this house or the sale is a part of a chain of sales, especially if you are dealing with multiple offers. As you know, it's not just one person buys one house, because let's just say somebody's in an apartment, they go from their apartment, then they go buy their first house, the person that was in their first house now in the second house is going to the third house, and then look at this guy here at the end that's going from the house to the RV. All right? Well, so we got 3 or 4 different transactions. Well, all of those steps, what I'm talking about, we're just talking about one transaction, all need to be repeated on the same situation. So can all the people meet the dates, the conditions that are met as when you've written, and how you've written the contract, okay? Personal property, especially for your newer agents, this is a really tough one to define. Personal property it could be the fridge, unless it's a built-in. Typically, it's a washer and dryer. For Crystal in Colorado that's selling a cabin, it could be a cord of wood. Somebody that's up on a lake in northern Wisconsin, it could be the dock, all right, that you roll in and roll out every day. You need to know what your personal property is, and in most states now, the personal property is supposed to be in the purchase agreement itself, okay? But you need to talk to the lender, because I can tell you the lenders and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac say, take the personal property out. It's not a part of the real estate transaction. So we've got this constant butting of heads. You should probably work with your broker, your manager. If you don't have a personal property agreement, you need to work one up that is legal and compliant to your state's guidelines. Have the personal property listed. And by the way, I'll just give you a quick tip. One of my agents had a situation where he put in the contract, washer and dryer as seen in home on a particular date. And he took a picture with his cell phone, with his smartphone. And the listing agent, again, he represented the buyer. The listing agent called the night before closing and said, I just want to let you know that the washer and dryer that you saw when you wrote up the contract is not the washer and dryer your buyer is getting. He said, wait a second. I got a picture. It's in the contract. He goes, well, my seller already took the washer and dryer. And my agent said, well, you know what? We're not closing. Okay? And these are the silly things that the night before closing that come up over, we're talking $500 to $1,000 that should have been handled beforehand. The listing agent should have been very clear with that seller saying, this is the washer and dryer that's staying in the house. This is in the agreement. He's got a picture. It's worded that way, okay? Don't think he can pull it out because it's got to be done, okay? Home inspections are always encouraged. I can tell you that in today's market, in my experience of selling real estate, I will not sell a home. Now again, residential real estate. I will not sell a home that does not have some type of a home inspection. If I have a buyer that says to me, I'm going to buy this thing, I'm multiple offers, I don't want to lose it, I'm going to say, you know what, I can't represent you, only because so many things pop up that your inspector should be picking up, and that you, with your buyer's cooperation and your assistance, is negotiated out. There's so many things that are under the surface that you don't know that you don't want to be liable for. So prepare your client for negotiations as a part of that home inspection. I'm going on. Let's just keep it real simple. Let's just say that it's been determined that there's a water leak into the basement of the house. And by simple landscaping, they could divert the water away from the foundation, which should alleviate the issue. Okay? So part of your negotiation, you go back and say, hey, seller, put in some landscaping. Let's get the drainage away. And the seller goes, you know what? I'm out of money. I'm moving. I got a bad back. I'm 7 years old. I'm not doing this. Well, buyer says, well, I'll do it. Well, no, buyer can't work on it beforehand because the buyer's not in possession of the property. Well, the simplest thing to do is probably renegotiate the price. Say, well, how much? Now, if you go conventional financing and the appraiser isn't called for it, you can negotiate the price down. Say, what's it cost to do landscaping? It's $1,000. Okay, let's reduce the price to $1,000. Move forward. Let the buyer assume the liability of doing the landscaping after its closing. If you can't come to terms on getting things fixed as a part of the inspection process, take a look at a rehab type program. There's many lenders that offer conventional rehabilitation programs as well as a 203K. Okay? Whoops. Okay, Jane, any other questions on this one? I went pretty fast.
Yes. Well, time is fleeting here, but Martine asked, what makes the difference between a condo and a townhouse?
Oh, excellent question. I'll go back to the legal definition from Real Estate 101 in 1991. The legal definition of a condo townhouse is a townhouse you own studs out, meaning the walls out. Whereas a condominium you own from the walls or studs in, okay? So the drywall and so on. Now there's little variations from maybe from state to state, but we'll say studs out, it's a townhouse, but you own the dirt underneath it. So think about it, outside and down. So you're responsible for the roof, the walls, and the grounds that the property sits upon. Whereas a condo, it studs in, so you own all the space within it, okay? But then the land that it sits upon is outside of the studs, so that's owned by the association or everybody that's a unit owner. The way to tell, and Martine, that's a great question that I try to help with my home buyers, is take a look at the legal description. Now again, not all these sites like Zillow and Realtor.com does it show the actual property description, or the property's legal description. And some realtors, no offense, I'm sure it's none of you guys that are in our webinar today, but when you put legal to govern, that's bad, okay? There is no such thing as legal to govern. You put in the legal description because that is what everything is based upon as far as the sale of real estate is on the legal description. If you see lot and block, like lot 1, block 1, honeymoon estate, that is typically going to be a townhome, or lot block means that the dwelling is you purchasing the dirt underneath it, okay? Whereas the condominium, it's going to say unit number 121 of Shadowbrook, phase 4. And unit number 22, Shadowbrook Garage Condominiums, Phase 5. Well, it says condominiums in the legal description. It's a condo, okay? When you look at it, here's where we run into problems, especially in our market, and I'm pretty sure in other parts of the country, because the national builders are doing this. It's cheaper for a national builder to put up townhomes or row homes that look like a townhome, but condo, because they don't have to do as much paperwork. There's not as much recording process that goes along. The title companies that they work with will do a master policy at a much lesser fee, a lesser rate. So you'll pull up to the front of a house, and it's a row house, okay? Everybody's got their own separate entrance, and the garages might be across the street or across the private road. And you look at it and go, yeah, that looks like a really cool townhouse, a row house. Well, you know what? You look at the legal description, and that's probably, like I said, that's like unit 112. The garage would be unit number 238. That would mean that it's a condo. And then in that particular case, the condo would have to be approved for the financing that the buyer's obtaining. Any other questions?
Martina asked, what about the little garden for the townhouse? We own it or not?
Okay. I don't know if I can answer that in this webinar today, because when you say a little garden, it would have to be depending upon where it's sitting, and if it's on your property or is it shared by others. Okay, it's a part of the common areas. You'd have to go into your the association's declarations and bylaws, and it'll show who, let's say, has rights to use the garden. Good question. Kind of stumped me on that one.
All right, great. Well, we are closing in on running long, so let's get on to step 4.
Okay, step 4. Here we go. Here comes the closing, gang. So here we go. When you're getting prepared for the closing, you want to make sure that all the conditions of the sale have been met. Okay, if it's a short sale foreclosure, are you using a third party? You want to make sure that you had contact with them all the way through the process, and you don't just show up at the closing and say, gee, I hope that everybody brought in all the docs that they needed. Were the deeds properly prepared? Okay, we got a warranty deed, or was it a probate deed or a limited deed? You want to find all these things beforehand. Again, preparing yourself for the closing. If it's been a rehab, I'm just going to say that the stuff's got to be done prior to closing. You can't escrow, especially for things on the inside, in most marketplaces. As I share with you in steps 2 and 3, and you'll see here in the PowerPoint, it says at least 7 days before the contract closing day, confirm the following. Now, I said 5, and I'm going to follow through with this. I'll say 7. If you can get 7, great. 5 is kind of the typical amount of time beforehand. 5 is actually cutting a little tight, but have the TRID requirements been met? You call a lender. By the way, listing agent, buyer's agent. You know who the loan officer is. They've signed the pre-approval letter. Has that all been handled? Next. Are all the conditions in? Pay stubs, bank statements, and so on. Third, is have the funds been wired? If they haven't been wired, when are they going to be wired? Okay? Have a conversation with your title closer or the attorney that's representing this closing to find out when do I need the funds by so that you can have a successful closing on that day. Final walkthrough. When you're doing a walkthrough, I would say to you, if it's a traditional sale, final walkthrough could be the day before closing. If you're doing a lender mediated transaction where there's been a short sale foreclosure, I would highly encourage you to do the walkthrough just prior, meaning like an hour before the closing, because so many things happen within the last 24 hours to the property. A lot of times they show up and they go, oh my gosh, I didn't know they took the bathtub. I had one, they took the 2-car garage, and it's a true story, okay? So, with that, do we have any questions and answers or questions that I can answer on this?
All right, well, we have time for one more question, which might be, what kind of paperwork or steps are needed for an all-cash buyer? Are they different?
Oh, great question. Yes. Well, when you're dealing with this on your purchase agreement itself, it's going to be showing what your sales price is, then it'll be your earnest money, and then it'll just say balance will be cash at the time of closing. It'll become typically in the form of wired funds. So you want to know what the wiring processes are. And from a seller's standpoint, so buyer's agents, be aware, the sellers are going to see that the buyer has sufficient funds already cleared as a part of the offer. Now, a letter from a stockbroker or a bank saying, John and Mary Smith are purchasing a house for $300,000. They're putting $10,000 in earnest money, $290,000 will be balanced in cash, and they have sufficient funds to close. And you know who the bank is? Boom, done. That's all you need. If they say they've got to sell stock or they got to liquidate a 401 or an IRA, well, that's now going to be a step or it's a condition in the process of the sale. So you're going to want to make sure that that's done. And like I said, I would get that done in the first part of the process and not at the end. Anything else?
Well, there's a few other questions, but we're really out of time. Maybe we can address them after. There's something about, does the title company have to show a flood map zone or not for a property at risk?
Well, no, the title company doesn't, the lender would, unless in your market, now there's where if your buyer's paying cash, where a lender would not be involved, then it would be up to the buyer to seek out independent flood, a flood search, and there's services that provide it. I would say consult with your local lender. I don't know of title companies that are doing flood zone searches. Good question.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you. We're out of time. We've run a little long, but you have had such great, exceptional presentation here today. We appreciate it. And of course, we want to thank everyone that was watching today and tuning into this episode. We believe you need to be smarter, faster, and stronger than your competition. And so that's why we are here to help you continue to grow as a real expert. Again, Jerry, phenomenal. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, you guys. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye now.